All right, Veronica, if you can advance to the agenda there. So what we're going to do today is I'll review the requirements, the technical details, and the changes from the prior year. Look at some of the recent reports. We did a webinar, I think, in August. And then Veronica will walk you through if you haven't filed your estimates or if you're waiting to file your actuals, how those processes work. And then we'll open it up for discussion. Just so you know, this data has been discussed, not at the state level, but advocates are looking at this data to use as a tool for member effectiveness. So if you need an incentive to submit this data, please do. And we're still having discussions about using this data for member effectiveness. And we can have that discussion in the open discussion later on. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, let me minimize the screen. Okay, so requirements for the program area reporting is CAEP members that were active during the 1920 program year must submit the required 1920 program hourly and expenditure data by program area. So we have those 7 program areas, and then we have 6 outside fund sources, and we also include fees and in-kind contribution as a mandatory, and then there's some optional fund sources that you can also report. And we use the NOVA system. If you go on to NOVA, and Veronica is going to show you this, you click on the program area section, and then you go to your you can go to your estimates, or you can go to your actuals for submission. So you submit total hours of instruction for program year 1920 in only the 7 CAEP program areas, and that would include K-12 adult education as well as non-credit. When you submit your operational costs for 1920 by fund source, you also do that in the 7 program areas. We have made a change with CTE. You can either report it as one number under CTE, or you can break it out by those short-term vocational, pre-apprenticeship, or workforce preparation. So it's up to you how you want to break that out. Next slide, please. And then just another slide on requirements. The actual certification, we had estimates due September 1st. Now you certify your actuals by December 1st. And this is making sure we understand this, that CAEP members will enter into NOVA their best estimate given the information and data. Because we know the community college system on non-credit is having some problems with, it was hard to begin with to decipher the hourly data by program area for non-credit. And now in the springtime, we had a change in the attendance collection process for hourly attendance. So that has complicated this. So we stress best estimate. We know that's going to be a problem for some of the members. And so we know that you will do your best to submit that. We also encourage members to prorate when necessary if funding sources or programs overlap or are too difficult to separate. CASAS has a kind of summary report that breaks it out by hours for this exercise that you can use. And so for those of you who use TopsPro, there's an easy way to access that information for the hourly reporting. And then we don't want people to confuse this process with your NOVA quarterly expenditure submission, which is due December 1st as well. That would be Q1 in NOVA for 2021, which is separate from this process. So please be mindful of that. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so more technical details. When you report, you're using the 7 program areas for reporting as I described. When we use the term instructional hour, it's defined as any reportable individual that has at least 1 hour of program-related instruction in our systems. We use the federal definition for instructional hour. We have the memo listed there. We also put it in the newsletter on all the details. We have frequently asked questions. We have the federal definitions that we're using. And just a reminder, we did this earlier in the year. For this year, 1920, we will not be tracking service hours. Our systems don't track service hours. We do track services, but not the hours. It was just too confusing. So we're only looking at instructional hours. Next slide, please. And then I think this is the last slide on technical details. Follow your agency accounting and fiscal policies that are used to report hours into your attendance system and the state approved system. We know the community colleges had some changes in their processes for non-credit, so we understand that. On the K-12 side, if you're using ASAP or another attendance system and then reporting that into TopsPro, you can either use the TopsPro report or use your ASAP report, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then the term operational cost is defined as the true cost of running the CAEP program. So it includes things like space, utilities, custodial, overhead, equipment, as well as normal, anything related to the day-to-day operational costs like instructional, classified, benefits, supplies, as well as administrative costs. So please factor those in if you're able to do so. Next slide, please. And then lastly, as I said, beginning in 1920, this last year that just ended, the CAEP will only track the CAEP funds, the 6 sources, which are CalWORKS, LCFF, non-credit apportionment, Perkins, JLED, K-12 JLED, and that those would be funds that you get from CDE, and then we owe it too. And then we're also listing fees and any in-kind contributions as defined by the We Owe It To program. And if you go to the memo that was, the link was there earlier in the slides, they have a definition, the federal definition of what in-kind contributions are. Because that was a little confusing at first. There were a lot of people trying to decipher what you mean by in-kind. So we decided to align with the federal definition on that. Consortium may choose to have their members report additional fund sources, like if they get state funds, they get We Owe One, if they get strong workforce, if they get a federal grant that's outside of the We Owe It To program. But that's not a requirement. That's up to the consortia if they want to do that. So because some consortia use this exercise and the information in NOVA for program areas for planning purposes, for determining budgets and allocations and things like that. So this is a valuable tool to see what the landscape is for all the potential adult ed funds in the region. Next slide, please. So here were the recommendations. Tim Harmon did an analysis of the last 2 years. He's done a report every year, and his analysis recommended a few things like standardized member names across reports, because certain years one member was called one thing and then the next year they were called something else. So I think that prevented Tim from running the reports to see some trend analysis and things like that. There were some spelling issues, as you can see here. And then one of the things we did implement was Prohibit report certification with 0 entries. We had 21 members submitting certified reports with nothing, which skewed the data. We also are implementing requiring consistency between hour and expenditure entries at the program level. And so we don't want a member to certify hours and no expenditures, or certify expenditures but not have no hours of instruction. So the key is, if you're going to report your hours of instruction, you should have a fund source that links to those hours of instruction. And if you are reporting a fund source, you should be offering a program that shows hours of instruction. So we know there's cases where a district might use their LCFF, but they're not reporting hours into TOPS Pro. So if it's not reported into TOPS Pro or into the Chancellor's Office MIS system, it's not part of this process. It just skews the data because we're using this for trend analysis and to see, over the last 3 years, how things are fluctuating with the hourly rate between hours of instruction and cost of running the CAEP program. And then lastly, they recommended link report requirements to records of funds available at the member level. That's a little more difficult. We're looking into that, but right now we can't program that into NOVA because funds are released at different times of the year. And this is expenditures. But I know it's important to have those allocations available, but we just don't get that information at our fingertips. And sometimes it's difficult to obtain, let alone put it in one location. We just don't have the capacity to do that. But you can always contact us if you're looking for how much funding you received in a certain area, and we can try to connect you with that person that might not have that allocation information. Next slide, please. So here are the changes that we did accept, and I kind of went over that. So we are not accepting for this year's report any zero entries by CAEP members. And we are making consistent between hours and expenditure entries. So it should not be possible to certify a report with hours of instruction in a program area or category, but no expenditures, and vice versa. So if you report expenditures and no hours of instruction, like I said, we are not accepting those type of reports. So and Veronica can show you, as a consortia, you can make certain members optional in this exercise so they don't go in and report that, and it won't hold up the certification. And so if you do have members that are in that situation, they can, maybe they reported at a board meeting, that's okay. But for this exercise in NOVA, we only want those ones that are consistent on the hours of instruction that connect to an expenditure source. So hopefully that's clear. Next slide, please. Okay, and so here are some of the reports, but before, let's do a pause because I went through that pretty quick. Let's see if there's any questions really quick. Veronica, are you seeing? I'm going to scroll through. Andrew says, please cover what we need to do if there are no changes between estimates and final. Okay, we'll have Veronica cover that. And then what if there are expenses to create a program, but the program is not offering instruction yet? So Anna, on that one, I would make that member optional. I would not report those expenses if you're ramping up and you don't have any hours, because what that'll do is that'll skew the hourly rate of instructional hours when we do our calculations. And so I would not report that if the member's just getting started and they don't have any hours of instruction. So this isn't like a kind of an audit. It's just a way to gauge how the cost of running a consortium. I know there could be some disagreement with, well, if someone's ramping up, we want to report that, but we want to tie the hours of instruction to the expenditures. So when you're offering instruction, what's that cost of offering that program? So I know that's a little tricky for startups, but to keep it clean and keep the data clean, we want to avoid reporting that until they get those hours of instruction. So I think, did I cover all the questions, Veronica, I think?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So here are some of so Tim Harmon and Veronica did a webinar in August, and Tim showed some of these graphics. I just, these slides and things. So for 1819, as you can see how the hours of instruction by program area line up, pretty consistent with what we thought, the big programs, ABE, ASE, CTE, which would include workforce prep, short-term CTE and pre-apprenticeship, about 25%, ABE, ASE 23%, and then a lot of hours spent in ESL and EL Civics, those co-ops if you're a WIO2 grantee, and then a smaller extent, adults with disabilities and K-12 success. Next slide, please. And then here are the expenditures. A little different. They don't match up exactly, but you can see, maybe ABE ASC, even though it's 3% of the hours, it's 27% of the expenditures. ESL, EL Civics, a little bit less on the expenditures. So you can see how this information kind of informs us of what's going on. Next slide, please. And then here are the expenditures by fund source. Of course, a majority is the CAEP funds, or AEDG as we used to call it. But then the other two big fund sources are non-credit apportionment at about 15%. And then you have WIO2 about 9%. And then fees and in-kind come in about 6.5% if you include those. And then you get things like contracted services that are optional. And then CalWorks is a mandated report, but we don't have too much expenditure data. LCFF, jail ed funds, and Perkins, all part of the legislation for CAEP. But as you can see, those are not significant contributors to operating programs inside the adult ed consortia. It's mostly CAEP funds, non-credit, WIO2, and then a lesser extent fees and in-kind and contracted services. Those other 1, 2, 3, 4 outside fund sources don't even make up, it looks like 5%, so very small. And then optional reporting areas are other federal grants, other state grants, WIO1, community college supportive services, strong workforce, donations, things like that. So next slide, please. So here's the famous kind of data quality chart. As you can see, the correlation between hours and expenditures is a lot more consistent with K-12 adult school or county office districts. Community colleges tend to have a little more variation. That's the blue. So the blue is a little more scattered than the red dots are consistently kind of following that regression line. I think the green is the county offices maybe, or other programs, ROPs, things like that. So this helps us get to, seeing that the bigger the program you are, the more hours of instruction. That's a natural progression. So that says our system is operating like it should. And Tim will continue to analyze this data to see over the last 3 years if there's been any significant shifts or change. It'll be interesting to see this year with the springtime decrease in enrollment. I think there was a 10% decrease in overall enrollment as we saw in WIO2, which reflects a 10% decrease in the CAEP data. Community colleges that were WIO2 funded, we saw a 12% decrease in their enrollment. So we would see probably a decrease in those hours of instruction. So the cost, the hourly rate of offering instruction probably will go up. We'll see, because if attendance is down and we're still spending at the same rate, does that mean the cost goes up? So it'll be interesting to see that. So next slide, please. And then here is the separation community colleges and K-12. You can see K-12 is, the line there is, they're more clustered around that. So there's not as much variance. Community colleges, a little more variance, probably reflective of how difficult it is for breaking out the hours of instruction. So even in a non-pandemic situation, it was difficult to break out the hours of instruction for community college non-credit programs. And so that probably is reflective in the as you can see in the chart there. There's probably other reasons as well. And that's something we continue to explore. So next slide, please. Okay, and then I'm going to check for questions before I turn it over to Veronica. And from Andrew, I bet it's a function of what different community colleges are counting, especially to what extent they are counting overall general fund support from the state. True. Yeah, there is a little variance there. And each college district might approach this a little differently. That's why it's so difficult to use some of these reporting exercises to determine fund allocation. So if you're going to penalize a member for not reporting their funds correctly, it's very difficult to get the source correct. And so what does a entity report for expenditure information? It could vary from college to college. So with that, I think that was our only pending question. I'll turn it over to Veronica.
Thank you, Neil. So I will go ahead and stop sharing the PowerPoint and then move over to Nova to do the live demonstration. So is everyone able to see the Nova screen? Okay, great. So I have logged into Nova using my email and password, and here I am on the bookmarks page. So I'm going to navigate to programs and then CAEP, and we are referring to the program area report. So I'll go to the program area report tab here, and then this is going to bring up all consortia and what their status on the program area report is at this time. So I'm going to search for a consortium that I know that I could show you guys how to do this process. So of course, Allen Hancock is first, and I am going to go there first. I know Andrew had asked in the chat about showing how to submit and certify the actual. So I'll cover that first, and then I'll cover if you have not submitted your estimate, since there are some people or some agencies who have not submitted their estimates as of right now. So for the year, you're going to select the 2019-20 program year. We are going to be reporting on the prior year when it comes to the program area report. So I'm going to select 2019-20, and then Allen Hancock comes up because that's the consortium that I am going to be demonstrating. So I'm going to click on their consortium. And then here you see that this report as it stands now is uncertified. And then when I scroll down on the page, I see that Lompoc has submitted their estimates, and then Allen Hancock, their estimates are in draft status. So for those of you who have already submitted your estimates, you're going to click on your agency. So I'm clicking on Lompoc, and I see all of the hours of instruction that have been submitted as estimates. Now, if you do not have any updates to your hours of instruction based on the estimates you submitted around September 1st, then all you have to do is go to the next area for leverage funds. Again, review this information. And if you do have any updates, you can make them on the page by just simply clicking on the figure that is already listed on the page and then updating it. So let's say, for example, for leverage funds, this agency, they estimated that for ABA-ASC, they had only $320,596 for this program area in terms of estimated expenses. But now that they have done some reconciliation, they now know that their costs are, their expenses are, let's say $500,000. So you would just simply change this to $500,000 and then tab to the next program area. And again, if you have any updated expenses based on your reconciliation from September 1st to December 1st, then you would just simply enter in the new figure and tab into the next section. So once you have reviewed all of your figures and you do not need to add any additional fund sources, you have captured everything and your totals are looking correct, then you would simply hit next here. You would preview this information to make sure that everything is correct. And before I do that, I'm going to actually go back to the program area hours, because again, if you have reconciled your books and you know that you have additional program area hours that were not included in the first pass of this when you submitted your estimates, then you're going to update it by simply updating the number here as well. So let's say they went from 30,475 hours to 35,475 hours. So we just simply change the figure here. And again, you'll tab to the next. And if you don't have any additional and your total hours are correct, then again, just go next. We've already checked our leverage fund, so we'll go next again. And now you're on the preview page and you are going to check to make sure everything is correct. And as long as everything is correct, then you can submit your actuals by hitting the submit actuals button. And then it's going to ask you, are you sure you'd like to submit the actuals? And you're just going to say submit here. And then once you submit it, your primary contact. So in this case, it's going to be Sophia, Dr. Sophia Ramirez Gelpi. She is the primary contact. And so she's going to be notified via email that you have submitted your actuals. And then she's going to go in and she's going to certify that the actuals have been submitted and that they are correct. And then that will take care of the certification process the submittal process of actuals for the agency. And then when she goes in to certify for the consortium, that takes care of the entire deliverable for the consortium. So based on those who have submitted their actuals, let me see if there are any questions before I go on to
I have a question about a zero entry. I don't know if you saw that question.
Enter zero if zero, don't leave cell blank, correct. That is correct.
So you should put a zero rather than leave it blank?
In order for it to be properly submitted so that you won't have any hiccups from Nova, yes.
Okay.
All right, any other questions?
I think that was as far. Does anybody, I mean, Veronica, are you at the end of your demo?
No,
Okay.
I was gonna go through for those, and it only if it's needed. Some people may know how to actually go through the process. So I was just gonna go over if an agency still has not entered their estimates. That's kind of the starting point.
Veronica wanted to know if you could, when you're done with what you were gonna do, also show how to make a member optional if they don't have hours of instruction to match their expenditures and we want to make them optional. How do you make them optional?
So that we actually can cover that now. That is going to be tricky, and Neil, I think that's going to require a conversation with the programmers, because as it stands now, the only way to make a member optional is if they are a voting member only and do not receive CAEP funds. So the system automatically, so in the CFAD, when members are made voting members only, then the system automatically triggers them for this report as an optional entity.
So maybe a suggestion would be just submit a zero report to get around that. Is that the other option then?
That is the option, but then as you were saying before, it could skew the data.
Well, if it's zeros on both ends, then when we do the analysis, we wouldn't use.
Oh, so you're saying enter zeros for the hours of instruction and enter zeros for the.
So you're just basically entering a zero report.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise it wouldn't, the consortia couldn't certify it unless that member had submitted, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So that would be, so to answer Bronca's question, difficult to make someone optional unless they're a voting only member. That's something we have in the Nova scope of work to fix, but it's not going to get fixed until the spring. So in the meanwhile, just submit a zero report on both sides if they fit that criteria where we don't want to skew the data. They don't have either hours of instruction or they don't have both. So if it's not consistent, just submit a zero report and then have them certify, and then the consortia certify.
Okay, and then maybe we can.
Other questions. They do want you to do the thing that you were going to go over with the, I forget what you said, Veronica, you were going to go over something, but then
Mhm.
Bethany says, is it okay if a K-12 agency enters hours that differ from their program hours report in TE? For example, if an agency discovered a class that hadn't been tagged correctly in TE. Yeah, I think that's fine. It's your choice of what accounting system you use. We know for some people it's easy just to pull down the program hours report in TE and then just type in that information. But if you have a local system that has different information or more accurate, we'd want you to use the system that had the more accurate information. So that would be fine, Bethany. Okay. So that's it on questions. Margarita said I have the same situation with parent classes. So Margarita, what's the situation that you have 0 hours and 0 funds, or you have it in TE not reported correctly? Let's see. Anyway, we'll see what, I'll follow up with Margarita. If you want to continue, Veronica, that's fine.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go back to program area report and identify another consortium who I know have not submitted their estimates as of yet. And so I'm going to go to the hold on one second. I'm going to search for oh, I'm on 2021, that's why. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to go to Antelope Valley, and they have a member who have not submitted their estimates. And as you can see here, Antelope Valley CCD is labeled optional. And again, that's because they were they are labeled as a voting member only through the CFAT process. So that's how they got that optional label. So think about that as you're determining who's going to be optional and who's not moving forward. And then also we have this workaround until we can update the programming. So Southern Kern Unified has not submitted their estimates as of right now. And so here is where we will identify, or they will identify their hours of instruction. So they're going to enter their hours of instruction by program area. And then you want to make sure that you enter in whole numbers only. Partial numbers will be rounded up to the nearest whole number. So keep that in mind as you are entering your hours of instruction. So here you just click in the field and you can use this up or down arrow if you'd like, or you can just enter in manually. So we're just going to enter in 10 hours here, and then maybe we're going to have 15,000 hours here, etc. And so as you are entering these hours, the total is being automatically updated here at the bottom. So you would want to enter in hours of instruction by program area for each of these program areas. And again, if you do not have any program hours of instruction for any of these program areas, you enter in 0, and make sure you tab through, because that's how the system will recognize that a number has actually been inputted into this field. And again, it's calculating the total at the bottom. So once you have entered in your hours of instruction by program area, you're going to come over here to leverage funds. And then same thing, you're going to enter in the expenditure amount, the total expense by program area, and also by fund source. So here are all of the pre-populated fund sources. So you can see we have CAEP, CalWORKS, Perkins, LCFF fees, etc. Now, if there are any fund sources that your agency utilizes, but it's not listed here, come down to add another fund, and you'll click on this drop-down menu, and then you'll see if the fund source that your agency utilizes, if it's listed here. And we also have other federal grants and other state funds. So this encapsulates anything that's not listed either in the additional fund sources or pre-populated, then you can just categorize it using other federal grants and or other state grants. So let's say I have an other state grants fund source. So I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go to add another fund, and then it's going to be added at the bottom here. So again, we're going to enter in our estimates. So that's already there, $500,000, and then I'm going to put $300,000. And remember, these are arbitrary numbers that I'm just making up, but you would pull actual expenditures from your fiscal reports. And I'm going to have $200,000 here. And then I'm going to just tab through. Now, if I don't have any funds or expenditures for K-12 success out of my CAEP funds, I'm going to enter 0 here, 0 here, 0 here, 0 here. And again, you enter in zeros for all of the fund sources that you do not have funds for. So I'm just going to enter in zeros just for demonstration purposes. And then I'm going to go down to my other state funds because I do receive other state grants, for one of my program areas. Oops. Then once I get to my other state grants, let's say for this program area, ABASC, I receive or I spent $500,000 here. And then I'm going to just tab over and enter zeros in these other program areas. I do not have any additional funds here, so I will not utilize that. Remember, it's calculating your totals by program area, and then it's calculating your overall total. So overall, I have 1.5 million in expenses for my program for the 2019-20 program year. So once I've verified all of my information and I see that it's correct and it's according to our records, I'm going to go next here to preview all of the details that I have entered just to make sure that everything has been captured. And if everything has been captured, then I'm going to save my estimates. And so it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to save your estimates? And then you're going to say yes. And it says you need to return later to enter in your actuals. So now, it jumped back to 0. Let me go back here, see what happened. Okay, so my estimates are saved. So I'm going to go back into the report and everything has been saved. So I don't know what wonky thing just happened, but everything has been saved. So let's say I know that these are my actual hours of instruction as well as my actual expenditures. So I'm just going to go through the motions of checking everything. I'm going to select next here. And if I know that these are my actuals, I'm going to submit actuals here. And then the primary contact for this agency or this consortium will be notified. So Dr. Steve Radford will be alerted via email that this report has been submitted, and then he'll go in and he'll certify for the consortium once everything has been entered. So I see that the chat is going off, so I'll check to see if there are any questions for me.
So Connie had a question. I thought you were just recording CPE, not the other two areas. Are we supposed to mark those other? It's up to you, Connie. If you want to break out your CPE, you can. If you want to report it as one program area, you can as well. That's your choice. It's an option. And then Prue says, what do I do if an optional member does not have any funding, and instead of having a way to go in and put in all zeros, it says not entered?
So if it's an optional member, then they don't have to submit anything.
Yeah.
And the consortium can still certify the report.
And then if Prue, if you have problems with that, just contact TAP.
Mm-hmm.
We'll walk you through it. I think that's it on questions. And Sorry if I was typing while you were talking.
Oh, it's okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing Nova if there are no additional questions or if there is not anything else anyone wants to see.
So Veronica, Prue adds, what if I'm not able to get this data because I'm being new in my position? So, I mean, it's your best estimate. So if you're saying a member is not willing to provide this information, first I would look at your bylaws. There's, when you certify to get these funds, this is one of those requirements, a requirement of the state to submit this information. So I would, if you're not able to get that. So what I would do, if the college, try to get your best estimate from the college, and just let them know this is a requirement of receipt of funds. And so, they should be able to do their best. I know the 320 reports were due, that came out in October. I think those are accessible. And what you could do is prorate from the 320 report, how many non-credit hours you have based on some kind of proration percentage that you have. And so that's what I would suggest if you're not using TopsPro and you rely on your community college system. The 320, that's a financial report for reporting FTES that will show your non-credit hours, but it will all be lumped together. It won't be separated out by program area. So you'll have to develop a prorated estimate of how many students you think are in each program area, and then use that percentage to divide up what that 320 report means. And then I would report those hours if you can. So that would be a suggestion on my part there. So hope that helps. And Jennifer says, and to be clear, if a member has submitted their reporting, but some program areas have not entered instead of zeros, they need to unsubmit actuals and enter 0, correct? So in Jennifer's case, if you have a member submitting in some program areas, let's say ASC, ABE is fine, they have hours and they have expenditures, but maybe K-12 success, they might have hours but no expenditures. We can't have imbalance there. So if they don't have the expenditure information to reflect the hours, then I would just make both 0 and let that member know that that we are only accepting hours as well as it aligns with expenditures. So for the next time, if they don't have that information available, just remind them that they won't be able to submit that until they're able to track either their hours or expenditures to report both, if that helps. Okay, and then Tricia says, we were able to pull program hours through CASAS. Is leverage funds any money spent on that particular program for 1920 for the entire year? Correct. So given those 6 fund sources and CAEP, as well as any fees or in-kind, those are the mandated fund sources that we want to see. The other ones are optional. And so if you're looking for in-kind, that's in the drop-down. Unfortunately, the programmers put it in the drop-down menu, the in-kind contributions. It doesn't show up in the regular list, but all you have to do is use the drop-down. Maybe Veronica can show you. Use the drop-down and you just add that to your report. It's pretty simple to do. But you are reporting those expenditures for 1920 for the entire year. So July 1 to June 30th. Okay, and I think that's all the questions. Okay, Veronica, do you want to continue on with your demo there?
That was it of my demo. I know you told Trisha I would show something, but I wasn't quite clear.
Oh, okay, how to add another fund source from the drop-down menu for leverage funds.
Oh, okay. So just picking from the list.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Let me unsubmit these actuals and then go to the expenditure report. And
so Dana, Veronica is going to show you how in-kind can be added. It's a programming issue, and I know it's kind of a pain, but Veronica's going to show you how easy it is to add another fund source.
Yeah, so in-kind contributions are here. So you just select the name and then add the fund source, and then it's going to be located at the bottom. So each fund source that you add to the list will automatically go to the bottom of the page. And so you would just enter in the expenditures by program area for in-kind contributions. Is that what you
so
want
I think that is Dana and Kim's question. Bronca had a question, said, did we talk about the definition of in-kind during the webinar? No, we didn't, but we're using the WIOA 2 definition, the federal definition of in-kind. And so we're pretty solid on aligning with the feds. So if you have a specific question to that, maybe we can talk offline. Connie says for 2021, how are we going to do in-kind if everything is distance learning and teachers are working from home? I'd like to know so we can start tracking. Is that for, Connie, is that for hours of instruction or for expenditures? Or both? So we'll see what Connie has to say for expenditures. So it's really, it's going to be how your accounting and business office is tracking expenditures. I'm assuming they're going to have to be using the variety of fund sources. If you're having difficulty tracking them by program area, then we'll have to talk about that. You can always do a proration based on the percentages for hours. If your district is having trouble separating that out, you can always break that out using a prorated percentage.
Okay, so Neil,
Yes.
I'm going to speak it because it's easier than writing it. We had a lot of our classes, our ESL classes, on school sites.
Mm-hmm.
So we found out how much they rent out the rooms.
Oh, I see.
And we used that as an in-kind expenditure for when our teachers taught at those sites. And so now our teachers are teaching from their homes. So we're not, are we renting space at their homes?
Well, I mean, that's up to the district. I doubt if the district is reimbursing employees for teaching from home, and that could be maybe a bargaining unit issue, whatever. But whatever they decide of how they're going to pay their expenditures, they should have at the end of next year how those costs were accounted for, because they do have to attribute the CAEP funds. Part of the allowable uses is it has to be allocable. So they would have to attribute those expenditures to the program areas, and they'd have to figure out, what's the administrative cost and the cost for running the program. So I would think that's on the district to figure out how they're going to do reimbursement for teachers if there's, additional costs now that things are being done in a unconventional way, which could be the conventional way in the future. So let's see how that unravels or rolls out in the coming year. We'll probably have to learn along with you of how districts are accounting for the cost of running a program as a result of the online learning.
Right. I'm working from home, so my electric bill has gone up, my heating, all of those things.
So has the district not talked to employees about?
No,
Is there
they are
any?
not compensating me at all.
Okay. So that could be a bargaining issue.
I'm contributing. It's an in-kind contribution.
Oh, I see. Well, it has to be
That's
certified
what
for the district. So I don't know if the district's going to certify your, I mean, but that could be a good discussion as far as in-kind. I mean, I don't know. We'd have to talk about it at the state level to get consistency, because we don't want, one consortium reporting home costs and then other ones not absorbing it, it would skew the information. So
Right.
good point, Connie, let's think about that. And before we have guidance for next year, I think we'll have to address that.
Yeah, that's why I just brought it up, because I knew it would be tricky.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wasn't thinking about that as far as in kind. I was thinking maybe the district and how they're reimbursing you. But if they don't reimburse you, there are that additional in-kind contribution that the employees are giving back to their employer. So that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you.
that up. And I think we're good with questions unless anybody had anything else you wanted Veronica to show you. We have 5 minutes left. And I'll bring home the point that it is being discussed by your professional organizations, that if you're not reporting your revenue or your allocations of outside fund sources, that could be part of member effectiveness. And that could be resulting in a reduction of funds. So we'll see how that plays out. There could be legislation. So stay tuned on that one. Okay, anything else, Veronica? Anything else you want to show anybody or? So Burr said AXA reported some surplus funds yesterday. Will that get to CAEP? So I'm not sure what, so AXA is a professional organization. What kind of surplus funds, if you can, Burr, if you can give us more details about that, that would be interesting. Was that in CARAC funds or something, or?
Neil,
Yes.
I believe, because I watched the same thing, I just believe that the tax revenue that was coming in was higher than what they thought it would be for a pandemic. I don't think it gives us any more money. I think it's more of it protects Prop 98 funds, if I was understanding it correctly.
Okay, so the big cut that we were thinking is going to happen we might be able to fight for our program a little better since we know tax revenue.
The webinar indicated that it looked like the funding was really not protected for 2024, but that it should be sustainable through 2024, which was, you know, a little ray of sunshine.
Oh, okay, that's good news. And we're going to do our darndest to promote the program of what we're doing. So our champions in the legislature will continue to protect our program. So we hope that continues. And we do have legislators in key positions in the legislature that can protect adult ed. So you guys know who they are. They're in, you know, certain areas of the state where they sit on educational subcommittees and appropriations committees. Those are key people that we probably reach out to. And, you know, this is a chance for me to plug. We'll be releasing probably in the new year a publication targeting certain areas like the Bay Area, the LA Basin, particularly the East LA Basin, as well as the Sacramento area, just promoting. These are publications that would promote adult ed in the regional consortia. And so it's more generic and it has student stories, but it ties back into why the California Adult Education Program is such a vital resource to have in the, you know, getting the economy back. And so we have these great student stories in certain areas that are key that legislators want to hear about. So we're looking forward to giving you access to those. And then you can go meet with your stakeholders in your area, and that can further protect our program. So we're looking forward to that coming out in the new year. So all good news. So I'm glad you shared that with us, Burr, and Adele, thank you for clarifying, because I had no idea what you guys were talking about, but it seems like everybody else knew. Let me in on the secret. Thank you. All right. So any last comments, Veronica? We got about a minute to spare. Anything coming up that we should be aware of other than getting your actuals in and your Q1 in?
Yeah. So those two deliverables that are coming up, just another reminder for those of you who may or may have not attended the summit, you do have access to those session recordings as well as the resources by utilizing the email address that you used to register for the summit. And even if you didn't register for the summit, you can still go onto the website, and we'll post a URL in the chat. You can go on the website, register for the summit, and then still be able to access those resources. So definitely share those with other colleagues at your respective school sites and agencies, just in case, you know, PD opportunities are available to them. And, you know, there are great materials from the summit that are still available. And then we also have our Advancing Equity Professional Learning Series that is still going on. And so I'm also going to post in the chat that URL. So if you want to attend, the next session will be on December I think it's the 3rd. But yes, we have that coming up, as well as the last session, which is geared towards classrooms as well as program administration. That's going to be on December the 16th, and then that will conclude that particular professional learning series. We also have the recording on the CAEP website. If you missed the session on implicit bias and want to check that out, it is available to you.
And then for you direct funded members, we heard from CDE, Carolyn Zachary said that CAEP funds should be hitting the county offices and local districts sometime next week if they haven't done so already. So hopefully if you're direct funded, your CAEP funds will be in your accounts hopefully by the end of the month or first part of December. So that's good news for those of you who are, you know, barely surviving or borrowing from your district or not able to borrow. So look for that coming soon. So we appreciate your patience on that one. So if Veronica didn't do so, I wish you all fiscal agents. Dana should have already received their funds. Oh, fiscal agents too, I'm sorry. Direct funded and K-12 or county office fiscal agents, sorry. And so wishing you all the best next week for Thanksgiving. We know we'll all be isolating, so good thing we could gather today to celebrate our program area reporting. And wishing you all a happy Thanksgiving. Veronica, if you want to close it out.
All right, great. And if anyone has any questions regarding the program area report or filling out the Q1 fiscal report, definitely reach out to TAP and we will be sure to provide assistance to you in getting those deliverables in on time. So thank you all very much and enjoy your time off next week, and we will see you all soon. All right, thank you.